Okay, so let us start again then. And we come and carry on with this beautiful sutta called the Ariya Sutta, which means the noble search or the noble quest sutta. And so far we have looked at the idea of the ignoble quest, the quest which doesn't get you anywhere, the quest which compounds your problems, which makes things even worse. And now we're going to look at the reverse. What is the noble search or the noble quest? And yeah, so this is what we want to do. So do you want to be on the noble quest or do you want to be on the ignoble quest? That is kind of the choice. And this word noble is kind of a nice word, right? Ariya is the Pali word for this. And it has this idea of something elevated and something positive, something meaningful, something kind of above the ordinary. If you want to be a noble person, we should carry on with the noble quest that ultimately, of course, makes you, the quest itself is noble, and it also makes you, at the end of the quest, you become a really noble person as a consequence of this search. So noble is a kind of a beautiful word. It's something with someone who is high-minded, someone who is kind of aiming for something more in life, someone with good intentions, with a positive purpose, etc. So I don't know, it's a nice kind of word. I think it is very suitable, apt as a translation for the Pali word Ariya. So what is this noble quest then? And it's kind of surprisingly simple when you see how it is phrased here now. What is this noble quest then? It is when someone who is themselves liable to be reborn, understanding the drawbacks in being liable to be reborn, seeks the unborn or the freedom from birth, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, extinguishment. So this is the idea of the noble quest. So you see a problem with what most people are doing, or maybe with what you are doing already, because you see a problem in that, and you are looking for the opposite direction. How can we get out of this problem? And this is always the noble search, how to remove ourselves from the difficult situation and move to something else. And the starting point here, the first kind of problem is the idea of rebirth. So you understand the problem of rebirth. You understand that you are liable to rebirth, first of all. So this is kind of the hard part, because rebirth may not be obvious and that you are liable to rebirth. So here is where we come have a degree of faith in the Buddha. This is kind of the point of having faith, understanding and accepting that the Buddha's insight includes the insight into rebirth. And if that insight is true, then you understand that we are all liable to be reborn. So then, once you understand that you are liable to this, the next thing is to understand the drawback in being liable to be reborn. Why is this bad to be reborn? And some people think rebirth is good. I can carry on, don't have to kind of disappear, and I can kind of do more things and, whatever. But is that really right? And this is the thing. Once you understand that there is one rebirth, then of course it makes sense that there is more rebirths beyond that. This is a thing which just goes on and on and on and carries on into the future. And the problems that come after this is the problems of old age and death and sorrow, lamentation, all of these kind of things. And you understand that once there is rebirth, you understand that there's not just rebirth, there is re-old age. There is re-death. And what sounds worse, death or re-death? Re-death sounds much worse, right? Because it sounds like there's no end in sight of dying. Dying is going to happen again and again in the future. Isn't one death difficult enough? What does death mean? Death means that all your attachments are going to be challenged. Everything that is dear and pleasing to you in this life is going to be challenged by this idea of dying. And then every time we have a new life, every time we build up new attachments in this world, new relationships, new things that are dear to us, we do this every time we're born. We are blind to what we're doing. And then we have to die again. the attachments get challenged once more, and then we do it life after life after life, never really learning our lessons. And really, it is without purpose. It is without aim. It's without goal. It is this roaming around blindly without any kind of direction in our life. Yeah, this is kind of what these things are like, really, at the end of the day. There's a beautiful translation by, I think, 𝐕𝐢𝐝𝐴 who translates the idea of samsarati. Samsarati is the idea of going around in samsara. Samsara is the round of birth and death. And he's called it roaming around. And the idea of roaming, the English word roam, means no direction, no purpose, no aim, random movement, roaming the streets of Singapore. You know, that if you're roaming, it means like you're kind of going from street to street, not really knowing where you're going, kind of random movement. And after a while, the police will pick you up because you're roaming around too much. Yeah, and that's kind of dukkha when the police picks you up. And so this is kind of this idea of samsaric existence. And it isn't really, our lives are kind of weird. We think that our lives have purpose. When you're young, you know, you come into this world and you kind of get started out in your youth and you think that life kind of has a purpose. Yeah, I get an education, I get into a nice relationship, I get a job. Yeah, it looks like there's some purpose to this. And then I have a nice career and I build up this career and then the career kind of comes to an end. Then people start dying around me and then I die too. Then I wonder why. What was this all about? Yeah, it seems so purposeful when you stand at the beginning of life. It seems so purposeful. It seems like we're doing something useful. But when you look at everything from the end point of life instead, from the point of death, actually, it doesn't seem so purposeful anymore. All of these things that we built up, all of these things that seem purposeful, all of these status that we build up for ourselves, all the attachments, all the things, actually, all of that has to go. Everything that was purposeful now becomes painful at the end of life because you have to give up all the things that you built up in your life. So everything changes. It becomes like what was positive suddenly becomes negative. Everything reverses its polarity, if you like, at the end of your life. That's kind of weird, yeah. And then at the end of your life, you wonder why. What was this all about? And the sooner you understand this, the younger you are when you understand that this is kind of what life is like, the more ability you have to change course and take the noble search rather than the ignoble search. So what does that mean in practice? And of course, in practice, it just means that we have a more long-term view of things. And it means that we think of the kind of the spiritual life rather than the material life as fundamentally more important. How we live is more important than what we kind of acquire, what we make out of the in life in an ordinary sense. How we live becomes the most important thing. And whether we have worldly success or not, okay, it's okay to have worldly success, nothing wrong with that, but that is not the primary purpose of life. So it's this beautiful change. So this idea of rebirth is actually very, very important. And this is why it is part of the idea of right view, because it changes really what matters in the world. It changes what our focus is about. Yeah, we kind of get this bird's eye view of existence, and we're thinking about things in an entirely new way. Rebirth changes everything. And when people say that rebirth doesn't really matter, it's kind of irrelevant. It means they haven't really understood what it is about. So this is seeing the drawback in being reborn, right? And we kind of pull back a little bit. We recalibrate our vision of the world, and then we kind of live our lives slightly differently as a consequence. So you see the drawback in rebirth, and then you see the unborn here is the ajata. This is like the freedom from birth. It has another way of translating the ajata. This is my preferred translation. You seek the freedom from rebirth, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke. This is the Anuttara Yoga Kema in Pali. And so this means yoga is like, yoga, it means exertion, basically. That's what it means in Pali. Of course, these days yoga means all this kind of various exercises, but it actually means exertion, really. And 𝐁𝐫𝐚 is like safety or freedom from that exertion. You don't have to go round and round anymore. You can relax, you can rest. And extinguishment is the last one. Extinguishment just means that's this actually Nibbana in Pali. And that's what Nibbana means. It means extinguishment. And what you are extinguishing primarily are all the kind of defilements and problems in the mind. This is the primary thing that we are extinguishing on the Buddhist path. So this is kind of, you are recalibrating everything. You're looking at things in a new way, and that means you change the course of your life as a consequence. So this is the idea of rebirth. Yeah, the next one is when someone themselves is liable to grow old. Yeah, understanding the drawback in being liable to grow old, seeking the freedom from old age, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke extinguishment. It is very contracted here, but I think it's nice to kind of draw out each one of them. Yeah, so you are liable to grow old. I don't know what you think about growing old. Some, there are some advantages, but there are some disadvantages with getting older. So you understand the drawback in being liable to grow older. So what does that mean, understanding the drawbacks of that? Well, it means that old age is usually something we don't really understand. Yeah, it is something that is kind of hidden for us. It's something that we don't really want to accept. We are blind to old age to some extent. It is one of those things, we know that we're going to get old, but we don't really know it. Yeah, it's so many things in the Dhamma is just like that. We know, but we don't know. This is kind of the tricky thing about the Dhamma. And so we need to make it real. And it's when we make it real that we actually understand the drawbacks fully of old age. So how can we make old age become real? Yeah, well, one thing is just to reflect on it, look at people around us, to see other people getting old. Yeah, and as we see that, we understand we have the same nature, and we know that we are heading in that direction. And sometimes you recognize your own old age coming, right? Sometimes you look at yourself in the mirror and you see more gray hairs coming out, you see more wrinkles, you see kind of things becoming more saggy, you see kind of your eyesight is deteriorating, your hearing, your legs are no longer as strong as they used to be, everything's kind of heading in the wrong direction. And you have to reach a certain age before this happens, but it starts fairly early on. Yeah, some people get gray hairs already in their 20s. Other people, it takes a bit longer. Yeah, so these are the signs. So what do you do when you see these signs? You look at yourself in the mirror, you see your first gray hair. What is your reaction there? And most people, when they do that, they see the first signs of old age in the mirror, whatever that might be here. It's kind of denial. Yeah, oh, you don't want to see it. You look in a different direction. And so the denial is really the first thing that happens. So when you see a sign of old age in the mirror, don't be in denial. Yeah, don't kind of I don't want to see you. You turn a different direction, you have a cup of tea instead, right? Don't do that, because that means that you're wasting an opportunity for taking in the reality of what is happening around you. This is where we want to go from knowing about old age to really understanding old age. So the moment you see this tendency of denial, of turning away from that reality, stay with it. Stay with that sign. Okay, I got a gray hair. What does it mean? You stay with it. And as that reality sinks into your mind, something very interesting happens to you. And what happens is that you become peaceful. Why? Because at that moment, when you see that sign, it means, and you take it on board, it means that some of the intoxication of life actually disappears. Because you realize, suddenly you understand that actually life is not what you think it was. It is actually different. You're not going to be eternally young. You're not going to be young much shorter than you ever thought you were. Change happens so fast. And the moment you let go a little bit of that delusion, because you let it go of a delusion, because it means that you understand the sensory realm is far less interesting than you thought it was, that is actually what sinks in at this particular point. You become peaceful because your attachments and your desires for that realm are being let go of. So stay with it. Yeah, okay. So, okay, I'm getting old. Initially, it's painful. It's painful to see because you don't want to see it. But then as you stay with it, that pain turns into realism. It turns into reality. And that forces the mind to let go, and you become peaceful as a consequence. So these contemplations, even though they have a, there is a difficulty with it, and it is a little bit painful to accept these things. It also has the ability to actually enhance the practice of the path and make you peaceful right away, because you're letting go of a delusion, letting go of a lack of acceptance of reality. Yeah, this is what this is about. So this is how you then turn the old age contemplation into something positive on the path, and it leads to something beautiful. And all of these contemplations, if you do them in the right way, they lead to these things. They lead to peace. They lead to tranquility. They lead to letting go. They lead to letting go of the silliness of the world, the attachment to things that are out of control, and to draw you towards the spiritual path instead, towards peace, towards kindness, towards compassion, towards all of these beautiful qualities that we actually trying to develop. This is what these contemplations do. It sounds strange, right? But this is how it works. So stay with that idea of old age. Stay with it. Allow it to sink in. And as it sinks in, it does its work almost automatically. Yeah, it started to transform your outlook on the world, what actually matters in life, what really is significant and important. So this is the beginning of the idea of old age. The other thing that happens when we see old age in this way, first of all, we are in a little bit of denial. The next thing that the mind does, right after being in denial, it thinks, well, how can I deal with this? Yeah, what can I do to counteract old age? Yeah, so it doesn't feel so bad. And then, of course, all the ideas come up. Oh, I can color my hair, these kind of things, right? So that even when you're 80 years old, you've got this black hair, yeah, and you kind of, or you can do all kind of things to kind of look right by, using makeup or cosmetic surgery. I don't know what to look right. Anything to hide the signs of old age, to pretend that it really isn't happening, or so you know it's kind of happening, but you are also kind of papering over it. You don't have to see it. And that is a different kind of delusion. The first one is the delusion that things are not really impermanent and unreliable. The second one, the delusion, is the delusion that it is in your power to control these things. Yeah, you are in charge of your destiny. You can control old age, and you can kind of be young, even though you're not really young, or whatever you want to, however you want to look at that. So that is another delusion, right? That we can control the world. And instead of going there, no, okay, actually, I know I can't really control it. So instead, you stay with it instead of going to the idea of control. Just stay with it. Okay, let me be myself. Let me be natural. No need to paper over these things, pretend that they aren't any different from what they are. Actually, it really is out of control. And so you don't actually go there either. And then you start to accept things. Then they start to become real. Yeah, and it has a beautiful effect on you. You let go a little bit, but the overall effect is very beautiful and very powerful. So this is kind of how we contemplate old age, right? And you may have wondered how to do that, but this is one way of doing it. And then the noble quest. Yes, then you're seeking the unborn, or you're seeking the freedom from old age in this case. And that is what happens when you let go. And then the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, the anuttara yoga 𝐁𝐫𝐚, and then the extinguishment, the nibbana, kind of comes. Gradually, all of these things come into focus as you let go of the idea of controlling old age and being in denial about it. Then you have falling sick. Yeah, it's when someone who is themselves liable to become sick or fall sick, understanding the drawback in being liable to fall sick, seeks the freedom from illness, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, or from bondage, extinguishment. Yeah, so sickness, is another of these realities. And you will notice that more often when you fall sick, you are kind of, you don't really want, or you think, oh no, I'm sick again. And it's kind of slight denial about sickness. And then not only are you in denial, but the next thing after you're being in denial is you think, well, how can I get out of this? Yeah, how can I kind of get to the doctor, get medicine? You have no idea how many medicines I have been given after I had a tiny bit of coughing. Everyone wants to give me medicine straight away. We're going to sort out Ajahn Brahmali and get him back. Yeah, sickness is not natural. We kind of so all the ways we go in. Actually, I'm very nice to be kind of people being so kind to me. So I really appreciate that. I do not mean to be ungrateful. I was kind of looking at the human tendency to want to control illness, right? The way we think that we can control this. Again, it's this two-pronged thing. Yeah, we are in denial about the reality of illness, and we think that we can control it. But, you know, remember that when you get ill, nothing has gone wrong. Yeah, illness is part of having a physical body. Every time you get ill, it's right. Yeah, nothing wrong with getting ill. It is actually part of the nature of the body. And so stay with the feeling of getting ill again. Stay with the feeling of sickness. What does it feel like? What does it mean that the nature of the body is to get sick? This is actually quite natural. Yeah, it's like Ajahn Brahm said when we go to the doctor, doctor, something is right with me. I'm sick again today. It's Ajahn Brahm's idea of going to the doctor. He never goes to the doctor, by the way, but if he goes, that's what he would say to the doctor. And that is exactly right. Yeah, we tend to say something has gone wrong, but nothing has gone wrong when you're sick. This is the nature of this body. And if you stay with that thought for a while when you're sick, and you feel the nature of sickness, if you really get sick and you have a fever, it's a really miserable thing. Yeah, it's really terrible. This is the nature of the body. And again, it sobers up the mind. Instead of being intoxicated with the idea of health, being intoxicated with the idea of youth or whatever, it sobers the mind up, and you let go a little bit. Suddenly, the body, the world, the five senses, everything seems far less interesting. If this is the nature of reality, this is what life actually is like. Yeah, and then you also realize the second thing again, that actually ultimately cannot control these things. Of course, we go to the doctor if there's a problem, and that reduces the illness a little bit. We get some medicines, but in the end, you can't control it. The illness will always come back, and sometimes you get illnesses that you cannot control. One day it is cancer or heart disease or something like that, yeah? And then you are on the way out because of these serious things. So this, again, a similar kind of idea, sobering up the mind, getting clarity about what the world actually is like. And when you do that, it has this consequence of drawing the mind towards the spiritual practice, yeah? Because suddenly it becomes clear what you should prioritize. The world around us is not that interesting. The spiritual path is what is really interesting, because that is what is independent of old age, independent of illness. Yeah, building up the resilience inside, building up the happiness, which is for the long term and not just related to the world of the five senses. And then ultimately, of course, getting out of this mess altogether. So that is the idea of illness. Yeah, then themselves liable to die. Yeah, understanding the drawback in being liable to die, seeks the freedom from death. Sometimes said to be the deathless, but that is making it too much into a thing. So freedom from death is a better way of thinking about it. The supreme sanctuary from the yoke, extinguishment. Yeah, seeing the danger in being liable to die. This is the most powerful, probably, of these particular contemplations, because death is a very powerful moment in our lives, when everything comes to an end. And it's so very useful to contemplate the idea of death. What does it mean? What does dying actually mean? Why is dying so problematic? And the reason why it is so problematic is actually a number of reasons. Yeah, one thing is like the fear what's going to happen after you die. It's kind of a bit scary. Where am I going to go next? what is going to happen is everything just come to an end. Am I going to be reborn somewhere? If I'm going to be reborn, where am I going to be reborn? What's going to happen to me? It's all very uncertain. Even if you believe in rebirth, well, maybe that, maybe that's wrong. You just don't know what's going to happen around the corner. So everything is very uncertain. That is one of the dangers of dying. The other danger is that everything in your life is going to have to be given up. Yeah, everything is going to have to go. When you die, it's it's a solitary thing, dying. You can't take anything with you when you die. Throughout history, people have been trying to take things with them when they die. Yeah, I don't know, this happens in almost all cultures of humanity. If you look around the world, when they die, I know that in Chinese culture, you burn little kind of paper cards and houses and things, yeah, because the idea is to take it with you when you die. But it's not just Chinese cultures, all the cultures of humanity, yeah, have exactly the same idea. You want to take things with you. The Vikings, that's kind of where I come from. But I have to warn you straight away, I'm not a Viking, so you don't have to worry. I'm okay. I don't do those things anymore that the Vikings did. But the Viking culture was the same, yeah, exactly the same thing. So you had the Viking were famous for their boats, their ships, which they kind of went around Europe, pillaging and torturing everyone around Europe. But when the Vikings died, they would take all their possessions and their wives, yeah, this is kind of really cruel, and they would put everything into this boat and they would burn the whole thing, yeah. And this is kind of the idea. If you burn everything together like that, then we go together into the next world together. We are desperate to take things with us when we die, because leaving everything behind is unbearable, right? And so we want to take our relationships with us, all our belongings with us, and the most important thing, the long boat, we want to take that with us into the next life. And so this is all human culture. Indian culture is the same. Yeah, you have this idea, which is an idea called sati. Sati is another Indian word, which also means that when you die, if you're a man, your wife, ideally she should commit suicide to go with you into the future life. Yeah, it's again another kind of very cruel tradition. So all the human cultures have this idea because we are desperate. We have a whole life building up all of these things, building up relationships, building up possessions, building up social positions, and now we have to die and leave it all behind. You can see how despairing it is. It is despairing unless you have actually practiced the spiritual path and you have built up qualities within that you can take with you into the future. Then it is no longer so despairing, because then you have spent your life wisely, and then you can die in a peaceful way. But for the majority of people in the world, they live for this world. They live to do things that relate to this life. And then when they die, they are confused and they wonder why, what's going on, what happens next, and they die in a terrible state because they understand they have lived for this life instead of living for the broader picture of what is going on. And of course, very often what happens is that if you live for this particular life, building up things in this world, if this is what matters to you, not only do you build up things, but often you also do bad things in the pursuit of those things in this life, right? Because this life is what matters. You're willing to take shortcuts. You're willing to break your precepts. You're willing to live in an immoral way by lying and cheating and all of these kind of things. Yeah, why? Because this life is so important to you. But that makes it even worse when you die. Not only do you have to give up all of those things that you cheated to achieve, right? You did all this bad thing, but also you bring that guilty conscience with you as well. All of those things that you cheated to achieve, then you have to give up. And also you have the negative conscience and all the bad qualities of mind. It's a double kind of whammy when you die. And the things are really terrible as a consequence. So this is the significance of the idea of rebirth. Yeah, you understand what really matters. What is really important is the quality of your heart, the quality of your personal qualities that you build up in this life. That is what matters, because that is an investment for the long run. That is what you take with you into the future. And so you change your priorities in life. And of course, it doesn't mean that we We can still do the same things roughly, but the way we do them is different. We think about life in a new way. This is the power of death contemplation. Taken in the context of rebirth, it's an incredibly powerful contemplation. If you know that you're going to die, if you know you're going to die at any time, this world doesn't seem so interesting anymore. This world starts to kind of fade. If you're going to die tomorrow, you're not going to think about your stupid desires or your stupid things. All of that is going to go out the window. One of the things, and I've been talking about this quite a bit, and this is one of the things I would recommend you to do as well, is to read up on some of these near-death experiences that people have. Because near-death experiences have precisely this kind of effect, because you see death is in your face, right? You have no choice anymore. You really see what's going on there. And in these near-death experiences, people then being faced with death, they see what happens afterwards. And when they come back from those experiences, they are changed people usually. And usually they look at life in a different way. And they understand, actually, life is not really about what I gain in this world, what this world gives to me. Life is much broader. Life is about living with good qualities, treating people well, treating yourself well. That is what life really is about. And they are changed when they come back. And when you read about some of those experiences, you too will be changed as a consequence. So this is the death contemplation. So use this death contemplation. Remind yourself, you don't know how long your life is. It doesn't matter how young you are or how old you are. Life is always uncertain, always liable to all kinds of things going wrong. Because of that, you live in a different way. You live with a different kind of consciousness. And this is what the death contemplation is about. Of course, again, this idea of the ego tends to sneak into it. The idea that we can control death, if I exercise enough and I have the right diet and I don't smoke and I don't drink and I meditate a little bit, right? All of these kind of things, then of course I will live longer and death will not kind of be so, I can kind of control the life a little bit. But of course, that is another illusion. Yes, of course, if you do exercise, the chance of dying there's some degree of control there. But the reality is that there are other forces far more powerful. And sometimes we see the people in the prime of life, well-trained, doing all the right kind of things, and bang, they fall over and they die on the spot. Then you have some other scallywag that drinks and smokes and doesn't exercise and then live to 105, right? It's really unfair. And this is sometimes that's true. On average, it is not true, but occasionally it is true. And this is kind of the realities of life. So there you are now. So this is it's kind of weird. Most people don't want to think about death. They think that death is a terrible thing to think about, and it kind of makes you depressed. But actually, the opposite is true. If you reflect on these things in the right way, actually, it enhances the quality of your life. You become more present. You become less desperate to amass things in this life. You have less desires. You have less ill will. Death, the idea of death, actually has a tremendous positive impact on your life. You become more conscious. You live with more kindness. All of these things come out of the contemplation of death. So when people are afraid of the idea of dying or death, it's because they haven't really understood what it means to think about this in the right way. So this is a positive thing. So remember that. And when people say, I don't want to think about death, gently lead them to understand that actually this is a positive thing. And then it will enhance the quality of their life as a consequence. All right. The next thing here is when someone themselves is liable to sorrow, right? And understanding the drawback in being liable to sorrow, seeking the freedom from sorrow, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, extinguishment. Yeah, so sorrow, I don't know if we need to discuss that too much, but everyone is liable for sorrowing in this world because our attachments are always being challenged, and whenever our attachments are challenged, then sorrow is just kind of just around the corner. Other people die, our possessions die, people in our family fall sick or whatever, and all of these things are liable to sorrow or depression. Yeah, the world is going wrong, there's climate change, there's a war, there's refugee crisis, and all of these things can make us liable to sorrow. And so again, we seek a way out of this because we understand that this is unsatisfactory. We're liable to becoming corrupted, so we seek the freedom from corruption, understanding the drawbacks in corruption, and then seeking the supreme sanctuary from the yoke, extinguishment. Yeah, the danger in being corrupted, and this is an aspect of non-self again. We're discussing before how to kind of reflect on non-self in the right way. And this is one of these things that we are not really in charge of the number of defilements that we have. We get defiled by the cause and conditions in society around us, by hanging out with the wrong people. We get born into this world with delusion and misunderstanding. And then because of that delusion, we tend to head in the wrong way, and then corruptions arise. And we may be a very good-natured person now. Many of you here are really good-natured people, and what a wonderful thing that is, but then suddenly not good natured anymore. Why? Because you are liable to being corrupted. You don't know where the future is heading. As I mentioned yesterday, we think that the future is going to be a continuation of the present, but actually sometimes it isn't. Sometimes we go into the wrong direction. We become worse as people. We become more defiled. We get more angry. We have all of these negative qualities arise in us. Yeah, because we are liable to be being corrupted. We're liable to these things through the cause and conditions around us. That's kind of scary. And this really comes from an understanding of the idea of non-self, that we are not in charge. We don't know where things are going to head in the future. That's kind of a, I don't know, I think the more you understand this, the more kind of concerning and worrying it is. Yeah, that it is so out of control. And if you think about it in the right way, it leads to a sense of urgency. Now is the time. This second, this moment is the time to make the most out of my life, because I just don't know where it's going to head in the future. What's going to happen? Yeah, how long is, am I going to have good Buddhist friends? How long is the kind of the good Buddhist teachers in the world? How long are they going to be around? How long is the good Dhamma going to be around? Okay, we still have the suttas now. How long are they going to be here? And before you know it, the circumstances in our life change. Things are gone in an irrevocable direction, which you can't get back to anymore. And suddenly it's all gone. And then you haven't got opportunity anymore to practice these teachings. Now is the chance. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. Understanding the idea of impermanence is one of those kind of fundamental things. How incredibly unreliable everything is. As I mentioned the other day, there's all these forces under the surface building up to change things, and suddenly things come crashing down around us as a result of all these forces building up out of sight, not really being able to understand what is going on there. And so the more we understand this, the more we understand how it's out of control, things are always changing, the more we understand the urgency of doing what is right, of living well, of practicing this path in the proper way. So, so that is the corrupted, yeah? So we're seeking all of these other things, and this is called the noble quest when we seek in a different direction. And then the Buddha carries on, and he says, mendicants, before my awakening, when I was still unawakened but intent on awakening, and the intent on awakening, the Pali word for that is bodhisattva, and you will notice that it is not translated as bodhisattva or whatever. It is actually intent on awakening. And that is, to my mind, the correct translation of that word. It means the Buddha to be in this last life is intent on awakening, trying to find awakening. This is what we're seeing here. So so before my awakening, when the Buddha was still the Buddha to be, I too, says the Buddha, being liable to be reborn, sought what is also liable to be reborn. So the Buddha to be basically made the same mistake that everyone else is doing. He too is seeking what is liable to be reborn. And we know that we have just seen before what are the things that are liable to be reborn. Partner and children, all these various animals and all of these kind of things. And we know that the Buddha to be also lived an ordinary life of a householder before going forth. So he too was seeking these things, which means that he was attached to them. This is what was the definition of seeking these things. He said before, seeking means you are attached to them. You're holding on to these things. You are craving for them. That is the problem. So again, you can see here how the Buddha to be before his awakening is very similar to us. Same kind of problems, same kind of issues. Myself being liable to grow old. I too, being liable to grow old, sought what is liable to grow old. Myself liable to fall sick, myself liable to die, myself liable to sorrow. Myself liable to becoming corrupted. The Buddha to be too has the potential for these corrupting states of mind, like everyone else. And so, what is also liable to all of these things, growing old, falling sick, dying, sorrowing, and corrupted. So again, this reminds us that the Buddha to be before his awakening is an ordinary human being, just like us. The problems of the Buddha to be are the same. And so when we see here that the Buddha to be practiced in this way, we should take this as an example for our own practice. This is why the Buddha is speaking in this way. And this kind of connects us to the Buddha in a new way. We see the Buddha as a human being. Suddenly, it becomes more natural to take the Buddha as your teacher. If he is a human being, he knows the human condition. He has been through all of these things. He has found a solution. Of course, that should be our teacher. Someone you can relate to very directly. You can ask him questions. How to diet and these kind of things. Then because he understands what it means to be human in a very, very immediate way. This is kind of fascinating. But of course, then what happens? Then it occurred to me, says the Buddha to be, right? He says, why do I, being liable to be reborn, liable to all of these things, to grow old, to fall sick, sorrow, die, and become corrupted, seek things that have the same nature? So this is kind of what makes the Buddha so special, is that he is like the first person in the world, and not the first person, but he is, obviously other people are asking the same question, but he asks this question in a very deep way, and of course he finds a solution to it, and this is what makes the Buddha so special. This is the first question we should also ask ourselves in the same way. This is our problem. Where is the solution to this? This is what we should ask ourselves as well, just like the Buddha to be asked this question. And this is kind of profound, and it shows you, on the one hand, how profound the Dhamma is, and also how simple it is. It is profound because it means that these simple things have a very profound counterpart. If you contemplate these simple things in a deep way, they have a very powerful effect on our lives. But actually, it is also very easy. Old age, illness, dying, sorrowing, all of these things, they are kind of straightforward. We know what these things are. All we need to do is to make them more real, more realistic, by contemplating in them in the right way. And as we do that, we will stand on kind of on the same level of the Buddha, going deeper and deeper and deeper into these things. And eventually, the result of contemplating these things deeply is that you reach awakening. Isn't that extraordinary? One of the things that I always found so extraordinary about the Buddha, and this is not just this sutta, but other suttas as well, that the Buddha is someone who contemplates the ordinary realities of life, especially the idea of dying. He contemplates it so deeply that he discovers awakening. And you could say that the existence of the Dhamma today, the existence of Buddhism in the world today, is a result of one person contemplating death in a very profound way. That is why we have the Dhamma today. That shows you the potential, for contemplating the ordinary realities of life. It leads to awakening down the track. So this is very hopeful, right? To those of you who were very confused in the beginning about the things I was saying. I don't understand what honeyball, perception, what's going on here? I don't understand anything. This is really what I was pointing to, right? Contemplate death. That is all there is to it. If you contemplate death, all of that honeyball thing happens automatically. So it's that kind of nice. So then you get to taste that honeyball if you contemplate death in the right way. That's kind of the bottom line of this. So it's simple and yet profound at the same time. But this is what is so beautiful about these teachings. You don't have to be very smart to understand this. Ordinary person, even a dum-dum can understand these kind of things. In fact, dum-dum is the wrong word. It shows us how we sometimes misunderstand what is important in this world. We tend to elevate intelligence as if intelligence is incredibly important. But people can be intelligent and stupid at the same time. You know what I mean? You can be really intelligent, but you can have a miserable life, not understand how to live life well. Intelligence doesn't always help. It is wisdom that helps. And it is possible to be wise without being intelligent. Sometimes we find very ordinary people, they have very ordinary lives, and somehow they are happy. Somehow they have understood how to live in a good way, because it kind of, they just understand. It's like intuition or whatever. They don't have to be very intelligent. So intelligence makes you very good at making money, maybe. It makes you very good at getting a PhD or at kind of getting a nice job in the Singapore government, or I don't know what. If you're really smart. So this is all good. It's fine. There's no problem with that. But it is no guarantee that you will be happy. No guarantee at all. And you see some of the Nobel Prize winners in the world, and some of them are terrible, miserable people, even though they are super duper intelligent. So intelligence is not enough. Sometimes we put the wrong kind of people on the pedestal. We worship intelligence when what we really should worship is wisdom. Because wisdom is where we understand how to live. And understanding how to live is far more important than understanding how to solve the worldly problems. Intelligence is about solving worldly problems. Wisdom is about solving the problems of life that makes us happy and avoid suffering. So we should worship wisdom. Worshipping wisdom means worshipping the Buddha, right? Or worshipping the qualities that the Buddha represents. That is where wisdom is. Of course, the Buddha was also very intelligent, because he shows that by the way he's able to articulate the teachings and these kind of things. So he certainly wasn't stupid, but it is the wisdom aspect of the Buddha that is really important. So this is how the Buddha to be now is turning away from the ordinary life. Why do I, being liable to be reborn, all of these things, seek the same thing? Things that have the same nature. Why don't I seek instead the freedom from birth? It has the unborn here, but the freedom from birth, I think, is a better translation. The freedom from old age, the freedom from illness or sickness, the freedom from death, the freedom from sorrow, the freedom from corruption, the supreme sanctuary from the yoke and extinguishment. The Buddha to be is turning in a different direction towards the liberation from all of these things. He's turning on to the noble quest, the noble search. And that is what we are seeing here. So this is the idea here. It's simple but profound at the same time. Now, one thing that is one little point I want to point out, which I pointed out with this sutta before, is that it says there, you will notice, the Buddha says, why do I, being liable to be reborn, seek what is also liable to be reborn, right? Remember, this is before the Buddha's awakening. So how does he know there is rebirth? Yeah, this is part of the awakening experience. And so, he remembers his past life during the first watch of the night, as the story goes. So why does it say here that how can he know that there is rebirth? And this is kind of interesting. And this is only a minor point, but it's kind of interesting anyway, because sometimes, the suttas seem, we wonder what's going on. And one of the arguments very often in the contemporary Buddhist circles, so-called Buddhist circles, is that the Buddha just took the idea of rebirth from the culture, and then he kind of carried on with that idea afterwards. And here, it may seem like he did that. So maybe all those skeptical people, maybe they are right. Maybe the Buddha just took the ideas on. And as always, I think the reality is often complex. The truth often, life is often complicated. There are many things that are right at the same time. So I think the Buddha probably did, to some extent, take on board the ideas. This was a standard idea in that society. And if you grow up in that society, well, that would be the ideas that you grow up with. So this would have been the Buddha's to-be's kind of default view of the world, right? And so he would have been concerned about rebirth, because that is what things were like. But then on the other hand, he wouldn't have been satisfied with that. That would not have been enough, right? So he would, even though he would have taken it as an assumption, when it came to his actual awakening experience, he would want to test those assumptions. And that is why he would remember his past lives during the first watch of the night, or whatever it was. And then he would confirm for himself, actually, there is such a thing as rebirth. Indian society at that time was a very pluralistic society with lots of different ideas in philosophy and religion and the spiritual life. And there were people who believed that there is no rebirth, that when you die, that comes to an end. There were other people that believed in eternal heaven afterwards, of all kinds of ideas. And so it was well known that these ideas were uncertain and unreliable. And so for that reason, obviously, the Buddha would have wanted to find out for himself. And this is what he did. So as often it is complex, you take the ideas on board, but you also understand that it is just an assumption. And it's the same thing for us. Okay, the Buddha says there is rebirth. Okay, I better take the idea seriously if the Buddha says so. As I said during the conference, this is the best evidence that there is rebirth, the fact that the Buddha says there is rebirth. At the same time, we also know that we don't actually know whether there is rebirth. It is still an assumption in our life. It is a belief. It is something we take on as faith, right? And so ideally down the track, we would also like to confirm that for ourselves in various kind of ways. So we are also, in the sense, in the same boat as the Buddha to be was before his awakening experience. Similar kind of attitude towards these things. Anyway, so why don't I seek all of these things? And of course, this is then what the Buddha does. And this is what is so cool about the Buddha. He seeks the ending. He seeks the liberation from things that you may think there is no solution to. How can you find the solution to that death and birth and these kind of things? It sounds impossible, but of course, this is what makes the Buddha so incredibly powerful, that he seeks answers to things to which we may think there is no answer to. So then, sometime later, while still black-haired, blessed with youth, in the prime of life, though my mother and father wished otherwise, weeping with tearful faces, I shaved off my hair and beard, dressed in the ochre robes, and went forth from lay life to homelessness. This is what the Buddha to be did, and that is where he begins his intent on awakening, right? And he kind of gets started on this path. So what One way of thinking about this, when he shaves off his hair and beard and becomes a monastic, this is right intention, right? This is when he starts his intention to awakening. What does that intention come from? It comes from right view. Yeah, the right view is the problem of old age and all these kind of things. That is the right view right there. So everything that we have been looking at now, this is really about right view, understanding the nature of life in the right way. That right view leads to right intention, which in this case is going forth and becoming a monastic. If it doesn't lead to becoming a monastic, it leads to living lay life in a good way, right? That's also right intention there. But this is what right view is. All the things we have been looking at now, this is right view. The purpose of this retreat is to develop perceptions in the right way. This is what we mean by developing perceptions. All of the things I've been talking about today, thinking about death, thinking about old age in the right way, this is the development of perception. And so you need to do this again and again and again, right? Remind yourself of these things. Remind yourself of death. When you wake up in the morning, first thing you should do is to think of death. Just to kind of start the day on a good, in a positive way. Actually, it is a nice way of starting the day. Actually, it's not a bad way of doing it. Yeah, you remind yourself of death. Okay, I better live well. Make sure that when I meet someone, remind yourself this could be the last time I see this person. Yeah, maybe this is the last time I see all of you. So I better say bye-bye in a good way. Yeah, maybe we don't know. And this makes us live better as a consequence. If it's the last time you see someone, do you want to end with an argument, or do you want to end on a good note? You want to end on a good note, right? Is it the way it is? So this is the idea of right view. This is what we mean by developing perceptions. So keep on at it. Yeah, do this again and again and again, and then the right intention arises out of that. Automatically, almost, we intend in the right way, and then the whole Eightfold Path comes out of this right view, this right perception of the nature of reality. And it's almost as if you don't have to do anything. Yeah, it is almost as if when you come to the road and you look left and right because you know the cars are dangerous. You don't have to remind yourself every day the cars are dangerous. You know that, yeah? It is so imprinted in your mind. You always look left and right before you cross the road. And it's exactly the same thing with right view and the Dhamma. You don't have to remind yourself to live well. It happens as a matter of course because you have the right view and you know what is important in life. You always look left and right before you do anything there. So the Buddha goes forth and he is still young. You can see blessed with youth. Yeah, the ideal time to go forth is when you are young. Yeah? And then it says, though my mother and father wish otherwise, weeping with tearful faces. You can imagine if you have a son like the Buddha to be, probably very impressive, super duper impressive young man, and it's kind of would be difficult to let him go. And again, it shows you the problem of attachment right there, weeping with tearful faces. But interesting that they wished otherwise. It means that the Buddha to be obviously had a conversation with his parents and with his family beforehand, telling them that he was going forth. He did not ride off in the middle of the night on the horse Kantaka. Yeah, he actually had a conversation, making sure that his wife and his child were okay, right? Sorting things out. The Buddha was actually more responsible than he is sometimes given credit for, according to later ideas. Which is kind of important, I think, yeah, because that sort of makes better sense. So he then goes off, yeah. So his parents, they allowed him to go. Obviously, in the end, they realized that, well, if that's what he wants to do, we're going to allow him to go forth. And I hope you do the same. If you have any of you have children who want to go forward, I hope you will allow them to do this. Why? Because this is the most important thing anyone can do in their life, yeah? The pursuit of the spiritual path and the practice of this. Nothing is more important in the world. So please allow people to do the most important thing rather than doing something lesser, which may be more convenient in some ways, but actually is still less. shaving off the hair and beard, and dressing in the ochre robes, he went forth from the lay life to homelessness. That is what the Buddha to be did. So, there you are. That is the extract from the Āryapariyeśana Sutta, the Noble Search. Simple yet profound at the same time. So now we can go from the high Dhamma to the ordinary things. We're going to go to lunch. So please have a nice lunch, because that is important as well. So have a nice lunch, and we'll see you back again at 3:30, and there will be some interviews, of course, at 2 o'clock.